Folks, welcome to week 9 of DMD 100, Intro to Digital Media Design. We are back fully online this week. And so, of course, week 9 is the week of March 23rd. So as you can see here on our syllabus, which of course you can find on Canvas under syllabus, week 9 we would have normally met March 23rd, 25th, and 27th. And so this is going to be the announcement and lecture for today. So this week we are going to be covering our next media analysis. This is our second media analysis. We already did one, which went really well. This one, the subject is going to be art, as opposed to last time we did television. Now, we are not going to be working in small groups because, of course, we're not physically there, and so that would be a little unwieldy to be able to do this. So you are allowed to work on this individually, which might be easier for you given that we are working online. However, that being said, if you want to buddy up with a friend in class or a couple of friends in class and work on this together, you are welcome to do that. I am just not going to create groups the way that I did last time, so it's entirely up to you. Now, if you do decide to work in groups, make sure that each one of you from the group uploads your final analysis when we're all done with it, okay? But anyway, so you can work either individually or in groups of your choosing, entirely up to you. Okay, so today we are going to go over what that analysis looks like. We're going to look at the different pieces of artwork, and then we have a little bit to talk about with regard to our semester project. Now, because this week is set aside as a preparatory week, as we are all getting online, there's nothing due this week, so we are going to be skipping the dump and clump exercise, so don't worry about that. So nothing is due this week. We just have some preparatory stuff to do, including working on our media analysis. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so media analysis number 2. Again, it's all about art. So you're going to choose one of the following works of art below, which we'll take a look at in a second. Once for your enjoyment, so to check it out, take it in. You might be familiar with some of these. You never know. They're very popular. They're very well known, so you may be familiar with them. Take some notes as you go, and then check it out alone or as a group, like we said a second ago. Be sure to pay attention to the details referenced in the questions below. So discuss either with the group, or if you're doing this on your own, simply think about it on your own. The artwork with an eye toward deconstructing the artwork, analyzing it, and documenting it. Really try to take it apart. Remember, we went into the whole seeing versus looking theory towards the beginning of the semester. This is a really good opportunity to put that to good use. Not just sort of look at the artwork based on its first impression to you, but to really sort of deconstruct it and take it apart. Now, these here are the questions you are going to answer once you feel that you have really taken in the artwork and analyzed it thoroughly. I'm not going to read through all the questions. You can read them yourself. But similar to the television analysis, it's broken down into categories. There's a first impressions category with a few questions, inferences, concepts, craft, circumstance, and response. These are different questions than the ones we had for television because, of course, the way you view and analyze art is different than the way you would view and analyze television. So there's different questions. Do your best to answer each of these as thoroughly as possible. Full sentences, please. Good grammar, etc., etc. And then, of course, you are going to present your findings. Again, individually or in a group. It's totally up to you. We are not mandating groups this time around. And you can present it either as a Word document, and of course you are certainly welcome to construct an actual visual presentation of your findings using PowerPoint, Google Slides, Keynote, whatever you would like. Be sure to include the name and title of the item, as well as the creator and artist. Okay, so let's take a look at what the artwork is. So we have the list here. They're similar to the television ones. They begin as the older item, and then they get newer and newer as we go. So we are starting out with 190 BCE, going all the way up to 2007. So we cover a lot of years with these. All right, so let's take a look at the first one. This one is called the Winged Victory at Samothrace, also known as the Winged Nike, and we do not know who the artist is. This is a sculpture. It can be found at the Louvre Museum in France. I've actually seen it in person. It's really enormous, and I have a replica of it in my office. You could probably go see it. So you'll notice that, of course, it's a damaged sculpture. The arms and the head are missing. It was not designed that way initially. I'm sure it had arms and a head when it was first designed, but probably through some series of war or natural disaster or something, it lost pieces of itself. So this is a marble statue. It's really majestic looking. It's probably about 15 feet tall. So your average human is probably like about here on it. But so you can check this out, and of course you can zoom in and check out the details of it. You can find many images of this online, but the image I provided you is a pretty good one. Okay, the second choice that you could go with is The Storm on the Sea of Galilee from 1633 by Rembrandt van Rijn, most commonly just known as Rembrandt. This is a really famous painting of his. As you can see, as we zoom in, it's a really complex painting. Lots of characters on board a ship during a large storm. There's a lot of metaphor and detail in here, and you can certainly do some research on it and find out more about it. Next, we have the music lesson, somewhere between 1662 and 1665 by Johannes Vermeer. Vermeer was a Dutch painter, and this is one of his more famous pieces. What's interesting about this piece is not only is it a painting of two people in a room, but it's also partially a still life, because there are actual still life elements in terms of the draping of the tablecloth, the vase on top of the table, the cello laying on the ground. So this is a really interesting sort of study in objects and people. Notice the reflection of the woman in the mirror, so you'll be able to check this one out. And of course, this is done in a style where the paint is sort of cracking on the board that it's on, and really if you zoom in you can see a ton of detail, so really spend a good amount of time analyzing that. Next we have The Spanish Dance from 1879 by John Singer Sargent. Now you can find the original of this at the Elizabeth Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston if you ever happen to get there. It is an enormous painting. It's probably about 14 feet long. It's a really beautiful painting, and of course the name is very descriptive of what's happening in it. There is in fact a Spanish dancer dancing. There is a mariachi type band in the background playing. This guy is not sleeping, although it looks as though he's sleeping. He's actually singing, but it looks like he's fallen asleep with his mouth open, but no, that's not the case. And then of course over here we have some people who are sort of dancing along in their seats, a really great and energetic type painting. Next, we have A Bar at the Folies Bergère from 1882 by Edouard Manet. Manet, not to be confused with Monet, but Manet was also an impressionistic painter, French. And so you can see here that this is an actual bar. Folies Bergère is a name of a hotel in France. And this here is the barmaiden, as it were, and she is about to serve this character here, who is reflected in a mirror behind her. Plus, of course, you can see the scene of what's going on. It's an impressionistic painting because, of course, the brush strokes are not very detailed. They're very loose, as you can see when you zoom in here. They look like brush strokes. They're not trying to be super realistic, although there is a certain amount of realism in this. So you can check that one out. That's a great painting. Okay, next we have Don Quixote from 1955 by Pablo Picasso. Now we looked at a bunch of work by Pablo Picasso, all his self-portraits, and saw how he sort of viewed himself over time. This is one of his ink drawings. Now, of course, Don Quixote you might be familiar with. It is the story of the knight-errant who was protecting the great princess from dragons, but in fact the story might have been that Don Quixote was partially mentally ill, in fact, and possibly tilting at windmills, thinking the windmills were in fact dragons, and his faithful sidekick here. But this here is an ink painting, an ink drawing by Pablo Picasso, and again you can zoom in and really see a lot of the detail work on the ink. It's very suggestive and not at all realistic, and definitely one of those drawings that you can really understand it from further away than up close. Okay, next we have one not really creatively named Artistic Space number 44. This is around 1960, and this is by a photographer named Cindy Sherman. Cindy Sherman had a really interesting way of working in that she put herself in all of her photographs. So this is her. She is both the photographer and the subject, and she plays characters in her photographs. So she dresses up in costumes and she creates scenes, and they are meant to be social commentary for the most part, but some of them are really sort of fantastical, and if you look through her body of work over time, they get more and more strange as time goes on. So you can certainly check that out. But again, this is Cindy herself, the photographer, as well as the subject matter, which is something she did very commonly. Okay, next we have Drowning Girl from 1963 by Roy Lichtenstein. Now, Roy Lichtenstein was famous for subverting comic book artistic techniques and using them for fine art. And so, if you're familiar with comic books at the time at all, you'll see that the thought bubble and the black line drawing, as well as the flat wash colors, as well as the duotone colors, the little tiny dots there, those are all very sort of comic booky in nature and history. But Lichtenstein took that sort of visual vocabulary that was used in comic books and that is still used in comic books to some degree, and turned it into fine art. And so you can sort of see what that's all about. Okay, and then last but not least, we have Afrocentric Power and Equality from 2007 by an artist named Shepard Fairey. You may have heard his name. He's fairly infamous. Shepard Fairey does silk screening and graphics over pre-existing items. Like he would take pieces of wallpaper and then silk screen images over it, and a lot of his imagery is appropriated, meaning that it's not original. He would take it from other places and duplicate it. And this is why he's fairly infamous, and because he's gotten into trouble for copyright infringement a bunch of times, but he claims that he is more of a collage artist and therefore should be able to use it. And if you look really close at this one, you can see that wallpaper texture that was on the original piece of paper that he is silk screening on top of, which creates a really interesting texture. And you can see there's some newspaper stuff in the background. So really definitely zoom in on these. Okay, so those are your choices. You only have to pick one of them, whichever one you really like best. Spend some time really looking at it, thinking about it, do some research on it. Feel free to do a little bit of background research on the artists as well as the piece itself, and then get into answering the questions. Okay, so that is it for the media analysis for the week. So the only other thing that's coming up this week is there is a little bit of movement on our semester project. So the last class before we went on spring break, we introduced you to step 4 of the semester project. And now we are actually going to start rolling on building your actual title sequence. So be sure you go to the semester project. Remember, everything can be found on Canvas, under Files, under Projects, and then of course you can find the semester project right here, and then scroll down to step 4. So now we're ready to start building the thing. So be sure to read through step 4. We covered some of it in class before we went on spring break, but definitely go through it yourself. And we'll talk more about this next week. But for now, read through this and start thinking about how you want to start building your title sequence. You'll see that there's a variety of tools available that you can use to build the title sequence, from really simple on paper to really complex, say Adobe After Effects, and a whole bunch of stuff in between. You don't want to be building it in a tool that you're not familiar with. We don't really have time to be learning new tools at this point. So certainly read through this and sort of start thinking about what would I feel most comfortable doing? How do I think I would get my best results? Okay, and then last but not least this week, there is an announcement which takes you to this YouTube page, which is just a collection of title sequences. This is the movie title stills collection, just in case you need some last minute inspiration on building your own title sequence right before you start building your own one. All right, now, next week, as you can see in week 10, we're going to launch into a new topic and really get rolling on building our title sequence. So that is that. So hope you guys have a good week. You will see more announcements from me forthcoming, but in the meantime, enjoy yourselves, try to get some work done, and be safe.